Alhamdulillah, salatu salam ala Rasulullah.
I just have a suggestion if we can maybe one time make like a lunch together all of us. Like,
I think so, inshallah. I think we should, there should be.
Maybe in 11
Yeah.
minutes, Sheikh, after we finish the class, Nazil Sa'id, maybe we do something after the class.
Yeah, I think people should, even in smaller groups or so, but you get to know each other a little bit more. And it is really important. It is
Separate system.
very important.
So we can hear each other.
Okay. Start. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu salam ala Rasulullah, ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala, thumma amma ba'd, to proceed. Well, Bab Nikah al-Kuffar. We are back to Imam ibn Qudamah's book, Umdat al-Fiqh, which is an abridged manual of Hanbali Fiqh that Imam ibn Qudamah wrote. He died in the year 620 after Hijrah. And we have finished Fiqh al-Ibadat and Fiqh al-Muamalat al-Maliyya, worship and financial transactions. We just got done with the Fiqh of inheritance, and now we are going over the Fiqh of family. After the Fiqh of family, we will have the Fiqh of like foods and drinks and oaths and vows. And then judiciary, jihad and judiciary, and that will be it. So we are about 2/3 through the book, maybe a little more, 3/4 through the book. So Bab Nikah al-Kuffar, the chapter on marriage to unbelievers, the Shaykh rahimahullah said, لا يحل لمسلمة نكاح كافر بحال ولا لمسلم نكاح كافرة إلا الحرة الكتابية. It's not permissible for a female Muslim to marry an unbeliever under any condition, nor is it allowable for a male Muslim to marry an unbeliever except a free woman from the people of the book. Except a free woman from the people of the book. And this is a matter of consensus. There is no disagreement over this. It's a matter of consensus. It's not permissible for a female Muslim to marry an unbeliever under any condition. That's a categorical prohibition. For the male Muslim, it is also a categorical prohibition, but there are exceptions, or there is one exception, which is that he is able to marry a Jew or Christian. And this would require some explanation. So why is it, and why don't we apply the concept of reciprocation here that we apply in international relations? And it's a good concept that Islam does recognize, right? Concept of reciprocation. So there are reasons here that Islam tries to protect the religious commitment of its followers. Islam tries to protect the religious commitment to its followers. But it does not force anyone else, basically, to do the same, or it does not. So it does not force the Christians and Jews when Muslims propose to them to accept the proposal, right? Islam will not force a Christian woman or a Jewish woman, when a Muslim man proposes to them, does not force them to accept the proposal. If it is okay in their deen, then that's fine. If they accept the proposal and it is fine in their own sharia, then it is fine. But when it comes to basically instructing its followers, Islam wants to protect the religious commitment of its followers. And it is undeniable that there is a difference between the roles husbands and wives play within the structure of the family, and that it is undeniable and has been throughout the history undeniable that it would be easier for a Muslim man to practice his religion if he were married to a Christian woman than the opposite, a Muslim woman married to a Christian man. We have rules and regulations. Islam has rules and regulations that it wants its followers to abide by and to live by. A Muslim woman, for instance, cannot have intimacy during her fasting or during her period. Well, a Christian or a Jewish husband may not necessarily honor this or recognize this. And knowing the family dynamics and knowing the sort of dynamics of this relationship, Islam does not trust that even if it happened, even if it was possible that in one case or in some cases, they will honor it and will be fine, but the Sharia does not basically take in consideration the rare scenarios. The Sharia takes in consideration the dominant scenario. And the dominant scenario here is that it will be difficult for a Muslim woman to live by her sort of religious convictions if she was not married to a Muslim man. Now, having said this is the difference between Muslim men and Muslim women, and why Muslim men are allowed to marry Christians and Jews and Muslim women are not. But that does not mean that Muslim men are given a sort of a license to do whatever they want. They also have limitations. They were allowed to marry Christians and Jews just because of the divine origin of these books. Makes the divine origin of these books makes some common ground, creates some common ground between us and the Christians and Jews. There are some commonalities, at least in the Gospel and the Torah. The concept of chastity, the concept of family life, the values of family, concept of chastity. These are concepts that are honored by the Torah and the Gospel. These commonalities would make enough compatibility between a Muslim man and his Christian or Jewish wife to make this prospect plausible, the prospect of this union plausible. But a Muslim man is not allowed to marry outside of the three religions. He's also having restrictions. It's not like, you're a man, you can do whatever you want. You're also having some restrictions. And the difference, as we said, is because it is and has been easier for a Muslim man to live up or to his religious commitments or to live by his religious convictions if he's married to a non-Muslim woman, Christian or Jew, than it is for a Muslim woman. Having said that, it is still disliked for a Muslim man to marry a non-Muslim woman because it's of the obvious reason that compatibility and commonalities, the more commonalities you have with your spouse, the better off the prospects of success of this relationship or this union. And you want to have more commonalities. And if the Prophet ﷺ is saying, تُنْكَحُ الْمَرْأَ لِأَرْبَعِ لِمَالِهَا وَجَمَالِهَا وَحَسَبِهَا وَدِينِهَا فَاظْفَرْ بِذَاتِ الدِّينِ تَرِبَتْ يَدَاكَ. A woman is proposed to for 4 reasons: her beauty, her wealth, her beauty, her lineage, and her deen. So marry the religious one that you may prosper. And if he's saying this, then certainly it would apply first and foremost to marrying a Muslim woman. Now, all of this, and so this disliking of marrying a non-Muslim woman for the Muslim man is applicable in the lines of Islam. But what about outside of the line of Islam? And when we say that it is disliked, certainly it is not forbidden because sometimes the benefit may outweigh the harm, and that's why it is disliked. It is basically to point you that it is probably better for you that you marry a Muslim woman, but sometimes the benefit may outweigh the harm for special circumstances, then it would be fine. Particularly if you expected that she would convert or something of that nature, then the benefit may, the Malikis particularly pointed this out, that sometimes the benefit may outweigh the harm, and that is why it was not categorically prohibited. But this discussion was a discussion in the lands of Islam. But what about outside the land of Islam? What about, in outside of the land of Islam? And outside of the land of Islam, the scholars in the past have divided lands into the abode of peace and the abode of war, or the abode of Islam and the abode of harb. But they also recognize the abode of ahd, the abode of treaty. And so that it is not a dichotomous division. It is a dichotomous division in the sense of the abode of Islam and the abode of kufr, because it's either, the majority are either Muslim, or the majority of the people of the land are either Muslim or not Muslim. But there are so many intricacies. It is a complicated issue. The abodes, the division of the abodes is a very complicated issue. Because what is it about? Is it about the majority of the inhabitants, or it's about the laws that govern the land, or what is it about? How do you say that this is the land of Islam? For our times, that division is not, that sort of stiff division is not applicable. And wherever Muslims are able to practice their deen freely and peacefully, and they have enough security to practice their deen, then the suggested title for those lands would be the land of what? The security, lands of security, lands where there is security. So you don't have to say it's the land of Islam, or the land of harb, or the land of kufr, or the land of ahd. You just say it's the Darul Amn. It is, or Darul Sulh, reconciliation, amn, security. From the basically international perspective, it is Darul Sulh. It is the land of reconciliation, or sort of peace. But from the perspective of the dwellers of those lands, it's Darul Amn. It is the land of security. So now, also when we talk about the discussion that the earlier scholars had about marrying a non-Muslim outside of the land of Islam in Dar al-Harb, is it pertinent to us now or not? You can't say it is pertinent to us because they were talking about Dar al-Kufr, and if it is not a land that is inhabited mostly by Muslims, then it is applicable to it. The same discussion that they had is applicable. No, it's not that easy. You would have to figure out, because the land of security is not the land of war. It is a land where Muslims are able to practice their religion freely. The relationship with people of this land, not only by the dwellers, not the relationship between the dwellers of this land and the rest of the people in this land, but the relationship of Muslim countries with this land is a relationship of reconciliation. It's a relationship of peace. It's a relationship of treaties and so on. So you can't really just transplant the rulings from there to here. That would not be right. But what you can do is you can basically look into the reasons that they provided. The reasons that they provided to say, to give a distinction to marrying a non-Muslim outside of the lands of Islam. First of all, what did they say about this? We said that in the lands of Islam, all of them agreed that it is permissible with some karaha, but they agreed that it is permissible. But outside of the land of Islam, the Hanbalis and Hanafis said that it is not permissible to marry non-Muslims outside of the land of Islam. The Malikis and Shafi'is said otherwise, but they said that it's still makruh. But the Hanbalis, and some people may say that, because it is very hard to ascertain the position of a madhab unless you really have studied the madhab well. So some people may say that this is not true for the Hanbalis, for instance. And if you look up the fatwa online, you will find that many people say that the Hanbalis permit the marriage to the harbiyya, marriage to a citizen of a warring enemy. Yes, they say الزواج بالكتابية حل الزواج بالكتابية ولو حربية. It's permissible to marry a كتابية, a woman from the people of the book, even if she is حربية, even if she is from the land of war. So how am I saying that the Hanbalis, they said that it is permissible to marry a حربية, but they did not say it is permissible to marry a حربية in the land of Harb. So, you could marry a Harbiya in the land of Islam. She could be visiting. You could marry a Harbiya even when she is in the land of Harb and you are in the land of Islam. That would be permissible according to all of them except the Hanafis. The Hanafis consider that the difference in land, اختلاف الدار, basically rules out the permissibility of marriage. Or they actually the validity of marriage. They say once there is اختلاف الدار, marriage becomes void. Once there is اختلاف الدار, marriage becomes void. But the majority said that someone could be residing in Dar al-Islam, someone could be residing in Dar al-Harb, they could get married and their marriage will be acceptable. Yes, permissible. Yeah, she is there, you are here, and the marriage is permissible. Now, but when it comes to in Dar al-Harb, Imam Ahmad says it is makruh even to marry a Muslim in Dar al-Harb, a Muslim woman in Dar al-Harb, because he says that, because he fears, and he says that if someone married a Muslim in Dar al-Harb, he has basically to يعزل عنها. He has basically to not have kids, to sort of, have some birth control, some modality of birth control, to not have kids because he's afraid for his offspring. But he said if he could marry a Muslim for a darura, for like some sort of necessity. But it is not permissible for him, Imam Ahmad, to marry a non-Muslim in the land of war, because he says that the stakes are very high for his offspring, for his children. So he would not allow it. The Hanafis would not allow it, the Hanbalis would not allow it, but the rest would allow this marriage with the karaha. Now, the fact that they do not allow it, does it mean that they are not married? No, it does not mean that they are not married. Like if someone is, say, Hanbali, and he is in Dar al-Harb, true Dar al-Harb, we're not talking about the Dar al-Amn, or the land of security. True Dar al-Harb, there's, let's say, go back to the time of al-Khilafah al-Umayyah, and someone was under Byzantine rule. He is Muslim, he went to the Byzantine Empire, he's there, it is through Dar al-Harb, there is active war between the Muslims and the Byzantine Empire, and he got married to a Byzantine woman. Now, what is the ruling of this? Okay, haram, but the marriage is valid. They're not in a sort of a zina relationship, they are in marriage, they are married, but his marrying her was haram. Because not every prohibition means invalidity of the act. Not every prohibition means invalidity of the act. There are certain prohibitions that would invalidate the act if they compromise the essence of the act. But the other prohibitions where there is infikak jiha, where they don't compromise the essence of the act, they do not lead to invalidity. This is one of the scenarios where the prohibition does not lead to invalidity. So if we say to someone that it is forbidden to marry a non-Muslim woman, then we are not saying that your marriage to her is invalid. We're saying that this is our position, it is haram, but it does not mean that your marriage to her is invalid. And it's also controversial, but this is our position. Now, when we say that we are not in the land of war, we are in the land of security, peace, reconciliation, etc., etc., will we then borrow? So what are we going to do when the fuqaha talk about, Dar al-Islam and Dar al-Harb? What are we going to do? Every scenario is different, and we have to look into the reasons why they forbade marriage to a non-Muslim woman in the land of war, and see if these reasons, because we're not in the land of war, we can't just take this ruling from them directly without re-examining it. We have to see their reasons applicable, not applicable. Because now we are in the land of security. So what did they talk about? They talked about two things, offspring and the harm to Muslim women. Harm to Muslim women. These are the two reasons they mentioned. They mentioned that يغلبونه على ولده, they may take his children away from him. And could this happen in our times? Could this happen here, for instance, where your children can be taken away and they can be raised non-Muslim? That could happen. So this reason is applicable. What about this? When, Umar ibn al-Khattab said to Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, I disallow you, I forbid you from marrying non-Muslim women because this could be a fitna to the Muslim women. You'll go out and just marry whatever women you want based on physical attraction or this or that, and then you'll leave the Muslim women behind. وَأَيُّ فِتْنَةٍ عَلَى نِسَاءِ الْمُسْلِمِينَ أَكْبَرُ مِنْ ذَلِكَ. How, is there any fitna worse for the Muslim women than this? So that was the justification of Umar ibn al-Khattab. Is this applicable here?
Yes.
It is also applicable. So should we then say that whatever reasons they provided in Dar al-Harb are still applicable to us, even though we are categorically not in Dar al-Harb? Yes. They're still applicable to us, even though we are in the land of peace, reconciliation, security, where we can practice our religion freely. But the reasons they provided are still applicable. So that's my position on this issue. Now, the ayat are mentioned, why is it that يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا جاءكم المؤمنات مهاجرات فامتحنوهن الله أعلم بإيمانهن فإن علمتموهن مؤمنات فلا ترجعوهن إلى الكفار لهن حل لهم ولا هم يحلون لهن. This is the ayah in Surah al-Mumtahana or al-Mumtahina. Both are correct. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "O you who believe, when the believing women come to you, muhajirat, making hijrah, famtahinuhun, examine them, verify their faith, that they did not just run away from their husbands. They actually ran away because they are Muslims, not runaways. Because some women can run away from their husbands and pretend that they are Muslim just to sort of and this happens in some Muslim countries, by the way, where non-Muslims, enter Islam just to get out of a relationship, because in some religions, marriage is permanent. There is no divorce. So, فَامْتَحِنُهُنَّ, examine them to verify that they're actually Muslims. فَإِنْ عَلِمْتُمُهُنَّ مُؤْمِنَاتٍ فَلَا تَرْجِعُهُنَّ إِلَى الْكُفَّارِ. And this was after al-Hudaybiyah. So if you know that if you verify that they are believers, return them not to the unbelievers. لَهُنَّ حِلٌّ لَهُمْ وَلَهُمْ يَحِلُّونَ لَهُنَّ. They are not permissible for them, and nor are the disbelievers permissible for them. So Allah is telling them that, the treaty that you have with the non-believers to return anyone who comes to you as a Muslim, don't apply this to women. This treaty men were intended by this treaty. Don't apply this treaty to women. Don't return the women to the unbelievers. So, and the justification is they are not permissible for them. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also says in Surah al-Baqarah, وَلَا تَنْكِحُوا الْمُشْرِكَاتِ حَتَّى يُؤْمِنَّ وَلَأَمَةٌ مُؤْمِنَةٌ خَيْرٌ مِنْ مُشْرِكَةٍ وَلَوْ أَعْجَبَتْكُمْ وَلَا تُنْكِحُوا المشركين حتى يؤمنوا ولعبد مؤمن خير من مشرك ولو أعجبكم أولئك يدعون إلى النار والله يدعو إلى الجنة والمغفرة بإذنه ويبين آياته للناس لعلهم يتذكرون. Don't marry the unbelievers, المشركات, polytheists or unbelievers until they believe, and a believing slave woman is better than a free unbeliever, even if you like the free even if you're attracted to her. But a believing slave woman is better for you than an unbeliever, even if you are attracted to her, the non-believer. And the same was repeated for the man. Don't marry unbelieving men. A male believing slave is better for you than like a free unbeliever, even if you are attracted to them. They invite you to an-nar, and Allah invites you to al-Jannah wal-maghfirah, and to forgiveness, and Jannah and forgiveness. And He explains or clarifies His signs for the people that they may take heed. يَتَذَكَّرُونَ. So anyway, this is a categorical prohibition that applies to men and women. So Muslim men and women must marry, based on this ayah in Surah Al-Baqarah, only Muslims. So how come Muslim men are able to marry Christians? This is a general prohibition. There is a specification out of that generality in Surah Al-Ma'idah. والمحصنات من المؤمنات والمحصنات من الذين أوتوا الكتاب من قبلكم. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala يسألونك ماذا أحل لهم قل أحل لكم الطيبات وما علمتم جوارح الذين تعلمون ما علمكم الله فكلوا مما مسكنا عليكم واذكروا اسم الله عليك واتقوا الله اليوم أحل لكم الطيبات. The next آية اليوم أحل لكم الطيبات وطعام الذين أوتوا الكتاب حل لكم وطعامكم حل لهم والمحصنات من المؤمنات والمحصنات من الذين أوتوا الكتاب من قبلكم. So اليوم أحل لكم الطيبات. Today the wholesome things have been made permissible for you. That's food, in terms of food. The wholesome things in general. وطعام الذين أوتوا الكتاب حل لكم. And the food of the people of the book is permissible for you. وطعامكم حل لهم. And your food is permissible for them. والمحصنات من المؤمنات والمحصنات من الذين أوتوا الكتاب من قبلكم. And also chaste women, chaste believing women and chaste women from the people of the book. Chaste women from the people of the book are permissible for you. That exception, it was only for Muslim men to marry chaste women from the people of the book. And this is a matter of consensus, but it was not extended to Muslim women because of the reasons that we have discussed before. The exception is not applicable to Muslim women because of the reasons we have discussed before. So now this is the ruling. So the ruling is that Muslim women, you don't have to worry about it. There is a categorical prohibition. There are no details. Muslim men, there is an exception of marrying non-Muslim women if they are Christians or Jew, but they also believe in chastity and stuff. There is an exception here. That exception is always standing in the Dar al-Islam, in the land of Islam. Outside of the land of Islam, where the laws, particularly family laws, are not necessarily Islamic, outside of those lands, we have two concerns that would make us two concerns. One of them is about the offspring, and the other one is about the harm that could be inflicted to Muslim women. These concerns would make the prohibition of marrying non-Muslim women stronger and stand up until now. Okay. So, is it still controversial? It is still controversial. I'm telling you my position. And would I recognize these marriages as marriages? I do recognize these marriages as marriages. I'm saying that it's haram, but it does not mean that the marriage is invalid or that they are a zina relationship? No, absolutely not. It's a marriage, but it is forbidden.
What does haram mean then?
Haram is a sin.
You earn a sin. You earn a sin. You're sinful in the sight of God, but the relationship itself is not. You don't earn the sin of zina. You earn the sin of risking your kids' religious commitment and harming other Muslim women.
Does it still stand? Because you said also marrying Muslim women also, you have the same risk for offspring. So what's on that then?
Well, Muslim women, they don't have to worry about it to begin with because they are categorically forbidden from marrying non-Muslims.
I'm talking about when a Muslim man marrying a Muslim woman, you still have the offspring problem.
Oh, well, this is a different discussion for later then.
Is it the act of marriage that's haram, or is it the the longevity of the marriage they're sinning throughout?
Is it one sin or is it perpetual sin?
Yeah. Like if
Every day
it,
is a sin?
Okay, no. It is not a perpetual sin.
no.
It is a sin at the time of marriage. Then the next one, the Sheikh talks about here, وَمَتَى أَسْلَمَ زَوْجُ الْكِتَابِيَّةِ أَوْ أَسْلَمَ الزَّوْجَانِ الْكَافِرَانِ مَعًا فَهُمَا عَلَى نِكَاحِهِمَا. Upon the conversion to Islam by the husband of a woman from the people of the book, or the conversion of two unbelievers simultaneously, their marriage remains in effect. So, upon the conversion of Islam by the husband of a woman from the people of the book, or the conversion of two unbelievers simultaneously, their marriage remains in effect. What does that mean? Now we will talk about the conversion, apostasy, and conversion. People walking in and out of religions. So you have many scenarios here. You have a scenario of two unbelievers being married to each other, two Muslims being married to each other, one Muslim and one kitabiyya, one woman from the people of the book being married to each other, and so on. So let us say we have certain scenarios where the marriage does not, get suspended or interrupted whatsoever. It's not affected by someone moving in and out of a religion. What are those two scenarios? If you have two people, like two Jews married to each other, two Christians married to each other, one of them converts to Islam. The marriage remains valid. You don't need to renew the marriage. The marriage remains valid. Because إذا صح ابتداؤه صح استدامته. If the marriage is okay to initiate, it is okay to basically maintain. The other scenario is two the unbelievers becoming Muslim simultaneously at the same time. And Imam Taymiyyah rahimahullah said, or before one of them finishes, the other one, finishes the testimony of faith, the other one accepts it. So it doesn't have to be simultaneous to the fraction of a second, but at the same time they are basically converting. In this case, the marriage remains valid. This is whether or not the marriage has been consummated. In all scenarios, consummated, not consummated, the marriage remains valid in these two scenarios. Now, let's talk about other scenarios. وَإِنْ أَسْلَمَ أَحَدُهُمَا, and that's by agreement, all of this by agreement. وَإِنْ أَسْلَمَ أَحَدُهُمَا غَيْرُ زَوْجِ الْكِتَابِيَّةِ أَوْ ارْتَدَّ أَحَدُ الزَّوْجَيْنِ المسلمين قبل الدخول انفسخ النكاح في الحال. Aside from the husband of a woman from the people of the book, if one of two unbelieving spouses converts to Islam, or one of two Muslim spouses apostatizes, and this is before the consummation, the marriage becomes annulled immediately. So two people that are contracted but they have not consummated the marriage. Two people that are contracted and they have not consummated the marriage. Aside from the man who's married to a Christian or a Jewish woman, if someone apostatizes or someone converts to Islam, the difference in religion between the two, there is one difference in religion that's permissible. That is when the man is Muslim and the woman is Kitabiyya. But aside from this scenario, if there is a difference of religion that happens before the consummation, that difference in religion, someone apostatizing or converting, that difference in religion would mean what for the marriage? Invalidation, immediate invalidation of the marriage, because it is not a marriage that has been consummated. With a marriage that has been consummated, we give it time. There is something here, the stakes are high here, so we would have to give it time. But this is just a contract. This contract becomes void immediately. But what if the marriage was consummated? What if they are actually husband and wife, they've consummated the marriage, they're living together? Then the Sheikh said, وإن كان بذلك بعد الدخول فأسلم الكافر منهما في عدتها فهما على نكاحهما وإلا تبين أن النكاح انفسخ منذ اختلف دينهما. If this happens after the consummation, but the disbelieving spouse becomes Muslim before the end of the iddah, then the original marriage remains in effect. Otherwise, the marriage will be considered to have been annulled as of the time their religions differed. As of the time their religions differed. What does that mean? Now you have a husband and wife who are married and they consummated the marriage and everything. One of them apostatizes, one of them converts, one of them apostatizes. What do? We suspend the marriage. It's called suspended. We don't void it immediately, we suspend it until her iddah, her waiting period ends. That is the period of suspension. If the apostate came back or the other one who did not converted, then the marriage will remain in effect. There is no need to initiate a new contract. It remains in effect. And all of this has to do with the Prophet ﷺ, Zainab, the daughter of the Prophet ﷺ, and whether she was given back to her disbelieving husband after he converted on the basis of the first contract, or whether a contract was renewed. And this is, hadith-wise, it's a very complicated issue and very controversial and complicated issue. But let us just take from this that in the Hanbali madhab, the marriage will remain suspended until the apostate comes back, or the one who did not converts, until they both become Muslim. And then the marriage will remain in suspension. And then if the person who did not converts, or if the apostate comes back within the waiting period of the woman, the marriage resumes without initiation of new contract. Everything is the same. Now, if they did not come back, what happens? We will say that the marriage was terminated from which time? From the end of her period? No, from the time the person left Islam. How is that practically consequential? Because she will not need to restart her period. Because if we say that the marriage terminated from the end of her period, she will need to restart a period. No, the marriage was terminated from the time they one of them apostatized or one of them converted to Islam. Now, what else would be practical here? If he divorces her during that time, like let us say someone apostatized, a man, two Muslim people are married. The man apostatized, left Islam. So he left Islam here. God forbid, ربنا يحفظكم ويحفظنا. So he left Islam here, and her period ended here. And here, he divorced her. Okay, if he came back to Islam here, yeah, that divorce counts.
A divorce counts
Counts.
in the 3 divorces.
Yes, it would count as one of the 3 divorces that he is entitled to. If he did not come to Islam until here, that divorce does not count. Why? Because we are saying that since he did not come to Islam within her period, we're saying that retrospectively, the marriage had ended here. So you can't divorce a non-wife. You can't divorce a non-wife. Okay? So what if they had intimacy here? What if they had intimacy here?
Wait, so suspension means suspension, like she leaves the house?
No, suspension does not, that's a controversial issue. Does she have to leave the house or not is a controversial issue. But the suspension, no intimacy. Suspension, no intimacy. Okay. So what if they had intimacy here? Yes, she should not, because the marriage is suspended. However, what if someone had intimacy because of shubha, because of some misgiving with a woman that is not his wife? Does he have to pay mahr? Yes, he has to. Yeah.
And it's not considered zina?
No, because of a shubha. Because of there is still a shubha. They still may think this is a shubha, for sure. They still feel that they're married. Or they think, or they have the misgiving, or whatever it is. The had would not be applied here at all. But the idea here is, what if they had intimacy here, and then he came back to Islam here? Is she entitled to any money? No.
No, she's his wife.
Because she was his wife. Because we did sort of go back and permit. She was wrong to allow him, to have intimacy with him, because at that time it was suspended. But we are going back retrospectively and saying that the marriage resumes. What if they had intimacy here and he did not come to Islam until her period ends? Then she deserves mahr for this.
Oh, because now it's as if it's a new marriage?
No, she deserves the mahr, and because of the intimacy. It is, any woman who has intimacy in a relationship that is a shubha relationship, not a zina, will deserve a mahr because of a shubha relationship.
But she already had a mahr before.
Huh?
She already had a mahr. She's not divorced.
Yes, she already had the mahr, but we said that retrospectively we will consider that the marriage terminated here at the time of his apostasy, or at the time of the conversion of one of them. At the time of the conversion of one of them.
But we did not nullify the divorce. The marriage there. So, I'm just asking.
We did not, we suspended it, but retrospectively, if he does not come back within her period, retrospectively, and that is why we're saying that it is practical, there are practical consequences, because retrospectively we will say that the marriage terminated here. It did not terminate here. It terminated here. And since we're saying that the marriage terminated here, a divorce that happened here is inconsequential because it's a divorce of a non-wife, inconsequential. Intimacy that happens here will basically entitle her to the mahr because it is like intimacy that happened during sort of like on the basis of a dubious relationship. There is shubha here. Okay.
One more question about that.
Yes.
The period, when we talk about period ending, what's the timeline for the period? Is it
3 months.
1, so it's 3?
3 months, right?
It is the 3 months, or three periods, or whatever whatever period applicable to the pregnant, to the etc. Okay, now we're done with this part. Then the next paragraph here, the Sheikh says, وَمَا سُمِّيَ لَهَا وَهُمَا كَافِرًا فَقَبَضَتْهُ فِي كُفْرِهَا. Are we done with all these scenarios? We will give enough time for people to ask about these things because there could be a lot of intricacies and a lot of different scenarios. But let's just finish what the Sheikh said. وَمَا سُمِّيَ لَهَا وَهُمَا كَافِرًا فَقَبَضَتْهُ فِي كُفْرِهَا فَلَا شَيْءَ لَهَا غَيْرُهُ or فَلَا شَيْءَ لَهَا غَيْرُهُ وإن كان حراما وإن لم تقبضه وهو حرام فلها مهر مثلها أو نصفه حيث وجب ذلك. If a sadaq was assigned while they were unbelievers and the wife received it while they were unbelievers, then nothing else is due to her, even if that sadaq was unlawful. If she has not received it and it is unlawful, she will have the sadaq of a woman, her equal, or half of that when indicated. What does that mean? We're talking here not about marriage to unbelievers, but we're talking about marriage of the unbelievers. So 2 unbelievers were married, for instance. Two unbelievers were married. And so this is the wife and the husband and the wife. They are married. And he gave her the sadaq. And the sadaq was like 2 barrels of wine or a herd of pigs. And he gave her the whole sadaq. And then they became Muslim. And she came and said, when we were unbelievers, he gave me my sadaq, 3 barrels of wine. And since that is not acceptable, I want my sadaq. I want my mahr. Yeah, we will say that it's too late because she had received all of it. And the concept that we uphold here is that marriage of the unbelievers is marriage. And Tabarani reports from the Prophet ﷺ that he said, وَلِدْتُ مِن نِكَاحٍ لَا سِفَاحٍ. I was born out of a marriage, not zina. So if he called it marriage, this means that the marriage of the unbelievers counts as full-blown marriage. The marriage of the unbelievers is always accepted, regardless of the sigha, regardless of the formalities and technicalities of marriage. You don't go back and say to them, was there a wali? Did you have 2 shuhud? Whatever counts for them, we will just take it. We'll just accept it. They are married. We will not look into how they got married. What are the 2 exceptions? Or the 1 exception? If the marriage, there are 1 exception that is by agreement and 1 exception that is not by agreement. The 1 exception that is by agreement is that if you cannot initiate the marriage now with her, you can't keep it. If you're married to 5 women, you'll have to leave 1. If you are married to your sister, which is in some people of some religions, they can marry their sisters, or to some people even can marry their mothers. Historically, maybe not as often now, but historically that used to be the case. And if you're married to someone that is an incestuous relationship, then you will have to leave her. We can't نقر, approve of this marriage now and say that it happened in the past, but you can't start it now, so you can't keep it now. Okay, so that's one thing. Or you're even married to your rada' sister, which is a more common scenario because many people don't recognize the milk sister as a sister, but we do. So you can't keep her. Okay. What is the other one that is controversial? Let us say a believer, the two unbelievers accepted Islam, and they are married, and they had 4 or 5 divorces in the past. Or now what do we do? The majority said they have to separate because their past divorces count. The Malikis come to our rescue, and they say their marriage, and despite the fact that we disagree with them very much on, they're saying that the marriage does not count. They say that nikah al-kuffar laysa sahihan. They say that the marriage among disbelievers is not correct. It is not validated because in our shara, it is not, it has to be a valid nikah in our shara to validate it. Therefore, their talaq is not valid. So neither their nikah was valid nor their talaq was valid. They start anew. He has 3 divorces from now. So that's, if you believe in that form of patching between the madhahib, which I believe in strongly, and I have told you before in the past why, then you could certainly find a way out of this, because it is hard for 2 loving spouses to tell them, now that you have become Muslim, you must separate. Anyway, but what if he gave her the dowry? So he gave her the dowry, she asks for the dowry again. No, we can't give you anything because that happened in the past, that's it. Now, what if he gave her half of it? Like the dowry was 4 barrels of wine, he gave her 2, and he still owes her 2, and they converted, or they came to us to seek our judgment. What do we say? Okay, we will say, what is the portion of the dowry that he gave her? 2 out of 4, he gave her 50%. Now she is entitled not to the value of the 2 barrels of wine, because wine is not la yutamawwal, does not have a value for us. She's entitled to 50% of the dowry of her equals, mahr al-misl. 50% of the dowry of her equals, mahr al-misl. Because he had given her 50% of the dowry, she's entitled. What if he gave her 1 out of 4 barrels? She's entitled to 75% of the dowry of her equals. What if he gave her 2 barrels of wine, and then they converted to Islam, and then he divorced her before consummation? She will now need to give him 1 barrel back? No. Qard al-khamr, it is treated like qard al-khamr. Qard al-khamr, which is the loan wine, is inconsequential. Wine is not money. It's, should be thrown. But there are a lot of sort of different scenarios. What if the wine became vinegar? And there are a lot of different scenarios, like intricate scenarios that are interesting. But I guess that's enough to just make sure that these concepts are clear, and then we can talk about the scenarios at some other time, inshallah. قولوا قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك اشهد ان لا اله الا انت استغفرك واتوب اليك.